Is this thing on? All right. Welcome. Today we're talking about melanin, skin color. Melanin is a protein as opposed to an enzyme, a protein that is synthesized in order to give your skin color to protect you from the sun so that you don't get excess radiation that will cause a mutation, damage DNA, and potentially cancer. So we create this melanin as skin color, and how much melanin we create is a function of how close we are to the equator. Now, evolving close to the equator means that you are making a ton of melanin, and all of your DNA instructions to make melanin are on and working and able to produce melanin. That makes your skin very dark when you are living close to the equator. However, when human beings migrated out of Africa to higher latitudes and lower latitudes, they started evolving to have some of the instructions for melanin be broken. Therefore, to not create as much skin color and not block as much of the sun, because the sun is also necessary to activate an enzyme to create vitamin D, which will increase your blood calcium levels and help your bones stay healthy and also help your immune system function correctly. Now, there is an enzyme, CYP2R1. In fact, there's a bunch of enzymes, but that's the one that I found that is used to synthesize vitamin D, and it is activated by the sunlight. Now, that is only happens when you are getting enough sunlight, and if you are living near the equator, you have tons of sunlight, and therefore you need a lot of protection against the sun, because too much sun is a bad thing, right? Not enough sun would also be a bad thing, because you wouldn't be able to make vitamin D. But then as you move away from the equator and you get less and less sun, more and more shade, or less amount of daylight, less intensity of sun, you're going to want some of those DNA instructions in order to make melanin. You're going to want some of that to break. Okay, broken DNA is called a mutation. So we will want some of those mutations to happen. Okay, so sometimes mutations are good, sometimes mutations are bad. Sometimes they can lead to cancer, other times they can lead to something beneficial. It all depends on the environment that you're in and how many mutations you are getting and where you are getting them. Speaking of mutations, the other vitamin that is super essential for our immune system, as we all know, is vitamin C. Now, vitamin C is something that we used to synthesize in the same way that we synthesize everything else. You have DNA transcribed into RNA, which is translated by the ribosome into a protein. Now, the protein could be a structural protein like melanin, or it could be an enzymatic protein like CYP2R1, which creates vitamin D. Okay? So there used to be an enzyme that was synthesized in order to synthesize vitamin C, to create vitamin C. However, we got to the point in our environment where we were getting enough vitamin C from our diet. Fruits, vegetables, fresh food, dark leafy greens, spinach, broccoli, the oranges, lemons, citrus. You also get it from, bananas. I mean, there's tons of great sources for vitamin C. So what our body did as we evolved in this environment with tons of fresh fruits and vegetables is it said, we don't need to synthesize vitamin C anymore because we are eating it. So the instructions that were used to make the enzyme that synthesized vitamin C, those DNA instructions were broken. When I say broken DNA, that means that there's literal damage to the double helix of DNA, and you are changing the actual letters of DNA, which give instructions to make a given protein. Those instructions are written in 4 different letters. Those are the 4 nitrogenous bases in DNA: adenine, thymine, cytosine, guanine. Adenine always pairs with thymine. Cytosine always pairs with guanine. The A, T, C, and the G, and the order in which those letters come determines whether you are making melanin, keratin, CYP2R1, whether you are making actin, myosin, a protein pump, a protein channel, or the enzyme that is going to synthesize vitamin C. All of those different proteins and different enzymes need different instructions, and those instructions are written in the letters of the 4 nitrogenous bases. However, mutations occur when you break those letters. You break that structure. Those letters that are bonded together in the middle of this ladder, the double helix twisted ladder, when you break those bonds and you disturb the adenines, thymines, cytosines, and guanines, sometimes it's just purely broken. Sometimes it's repaired, but it's not as good as before. And the instructions might not be able to be read in order to transcribe into RNA. Or maybe they're transcribed into RNA, but then the RNA has a different instruction. It's just slightly damaged. And then the ribosome is not able to read it, and it can't make the enzyme or the protein. Or it makes the enzyme or the protein wrong or differently, which is in the case of different types of eye color, because we have many different types of eye color, and in the case of hair color, because we have many different types of hair color. Now, our dark hair color is associated with melanin, but in our light hair color, we do have multiple alleles for that, and that's where we see red hair coming about. Now, the dominant allele for eye color, skin color, and hair color is all dark, a dark brown. But we know there are different types of dark. There's like a dark brown, and then there's also black. And then we know that when we have blonde alleles, that allele, which came from a mutation, we are still making a color protein for our hair to go along with keratin. We're making a version of melanin. Now, when we get different versions of melanin, we get different hair colors. We have black, brown, light brown, blonde, right, and red. And those different versions can come in different mixtures because you are made from two different parents. And one parent might be giving you one version of melanin, and another parent is giving you another version of melanin. One parent might be saying make a lot of melanin, and one parent might be saying don't make as much melanin. The reason that they have different instructions is because their DNA has been mutated in some way. Now, the sun is not the only way you can get mutations. There are other ways you can get mutations from nuclear radiation and from X-ray radiation. There's many things that naturally happen and have happened over the course of life evolving over the last 2 billion years that cause our DNA to mutate. And it's a pretty good thing, because without that, we would not be able to evolve to different environments. Different environments where we can eat vitamin C, different environments where we have less sunlight. Evolving only occurs because we have mutations. And those mutations are pretty natural when DNA comes around. Now, there are other ways DNA is going to mutate, and we'll have to talk about that a little later, but as a hint, when you are making new cells through the process of mitosis, you must replicate your DNA first. And in that DNA replication, which takes 8 hours, mistakes can be made by your cell. That's right. We make mistakes, our cells make mistakes, and they try to fix them, and they're 99.9% effective, but sometimes we make a mistake that is going to persist. Now, those mistakes, those mutations can lead to a good thing, like red hair, blonde hair, blue eyes, green eyes, brown eyes, or it can lead to breaking something, like the synthesis of vitamin C, right? Which turns out to not be a bad problem when we are able to eat the vitamin C. It all depends on your environment. Now, certain mutations somehow are dominant. Certain ones are recessive. We know that lighter colors in skin, hair, and eyes are recessive. And the great question is why? We don't know. There's no reason necessarily why certain things are recessive, but we do have dominant and we have recessive. So when you combine those two from two different parents, we know that one just shows up more. One is being read more to make a certain protein more.